EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Welcome to EM Weekly, and this week we don't have Dan with us. He's out doing EM stuff, go figure. And so it's just, you got me. But I'm excited because today we have the Region 3 Regional Administrator, MaryAnn Tierney, with us today. And, I always like to hear about what's going on across the country. And, what's neat about FEMA is that each region kind of has their own flavor. So we're going to learn a lot about what's going on there on the East Coast with Region 3 and East Coast. So I'm going to ask a question about that in a minute. We'll figure this out. But MaryAnn has a huge history. So she was the Deputy Managing Director for Emergency Management in the City of Philadelphia. And then she was in New York City Office of Emergency Management. And then she's at FEMA Region 3, seasoned emergency manager, a lot of time on the job. And I'm excited to have her in the studio. So MaryAnn, welcome to EM Weekly.
Thanks for having me today.
So, okay, the question I've always had, and no one can ever give me a straight answer. Maybe you can. Why is New York its own region?
Well, New York Region 2 covers New York and New Jersey, and then Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And
okay.
Yeah, and all the FEMA regions follow the traditional kind of federal circuit, right? So a lot of federal agencies have the same footprint, and it actually dates back to the circuit court system. And the judges would ride their horse through a circuit, and that's actually how the boundaries got set up for a lot of federal agencies.
Oh, that makes more sense now. I always forget about New Jersey because I'm a New York guy, so
Yeah, New Jersey, it's sandwiched right between New York and Pennsylvania.
All I know is when you drive through, you pay a lot of tolls. So how did you get involved in emergency management?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So I graduated college a long time ago before emergency management was something that you went to school for. And I was out of college and I wanted to kind of take a year off. I had some ideas of what I wanted to do, after college. But I was like, I want to take a break. So I'm from New York City originally. I grew up on Staten Island, and I figured I'll spend a year with my parents and I'll get a job with government because I have a major in political science. So I was like, of course I have to work for the government. So I graduated in 1999, and back then, the internet was not what it is now. There wasn't social media. The internet was not as advanced as it is today, and websites, like government websites, were not very developed, right? So I was in DC at college, and I went on New York City's website, and I started ticking through the agencies to figure out, okay, which agency would I want to get a job with? And I found the emergency management webpage, and they had, of all the city agencies, they had the best webpage. And I was like, all right, this is the place. And so I sent when you go to a website and it's contact us, and there's a form you fill out. So I wrote them an email, not even an email. I just filled out that form, and I was like, hey, I'm graduating college. I interned at DC Emergency Management in college. I interned at FEMA in college. I'm really interested in coming to work at New York City Emergency Management. And so I hit send, and I wrote me back. And they were like, hey, we have a job. So I went and interviewed with them, and then I got a job there, and I just fell in love with it. It was a great place to work. I look very fondly on my time in New York City Emergency Management, and still stay in touch with a lot of the people that still worked there when I was there. And that's how I fell into it.
That's awesome. I always love the trip that everybody has getting into emergency management because it's different for everybody. And so when you joined emergency management, were there a lot of females working in EM at that time?
In New York City, no. There was the New York City office was a lot smaller in 1999 when I started than it is now. Now I think it's probably over 200 people. When I started, it was less than 50 people. So it was a lot smaller, and there weren't a lot of women, but there were a few experienced folks, and not a lot though. Many times I was the only woman in the room, and frankly today there are cases where I'm typically the only woman in the room, and if there's other women, I'm usually the only woman that's sitting at the table. So some things have changed, but some things have stayed the same.
Right. So as you guys know, here October for EM Weekly has been Women in Emergency Management Month, and we try to highlight as many women in emergency management as we possibly can. And so MaryAnn's our first guest for this kickoff. So I think it's important to understand that the ability to have a diverse methods here in emergency management, we need to have a diverse crowd of people coming in for emergency management, whether it's minorities or women or people who disabilities and things like this. So I think it's really important. And as emergency managers, I know that most of us believe in that. So again, thank you for being here, for kicking this off for us. What are some of the challenges that you have, in Region 3 that are unique to Region 3?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for folks who don't know, maybe you have some international listeners, FEMA has 10 regions, and Region 3 covers the Mid-Atlantic. So we have from Pennsylvania to Virginia and then over to West Virginia. And what I've always found interesting about Region 3 is a real diversity of the landscape, the geography, right? We have really large urban centers like Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, and then we have really rural parts of the region, like the areas in Southwest Virginia and then in West Virginia, which is primarily rural. So we have to be able to flex to urban and rural emergency management issues. That's one thing to be thinking about. And then our hazard profile is also really unique. We've got the coastal storm threat right on the coast, like in Hampton Roads and the Delmarva, but then we also are significantly impacted from inland flooding threats from hurricanes. So I think about Irene and Lee, which were substantial hurricane events in Region 3 that didn't really impact the coast. They were inland and really kind of whacked central Pennsylvania in particular. And then in West Virginia, we have a pretty significant flooding threat. But that being said, it's not just natural hazards. We have to think about the technological hazards too. We have 9 nuclear power plants in the region. We've had chemical spills that have been declared events, and then we have the threat of terrorism. Given our urban centers, thinking about the nation's capital, Philadelphia, Baltimore, as potential targets, and then we do get a lot of significant number of national security special events. In fact, over half of the secretary-designated national security special events have occurred in Region 3.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think is interesting, and you kind of brought it up with the idea that you have a lot of rural areas too, and you have the huge city centers, and it's a complete different mindset between the two of them. How do you manage? And this is one of the things I love about FEMA is that, as a city emergency manager, you deal with your city, right? It's okay. I understand the stakeholders there. I understand the dynamics of the city, but with FEMA and even some state guys, you have to deal with all sorts of out to the rural areas and the dynamics and the stakeholders and the attitudes that are out there. What's the balance like for you when you're dealing with issues, specifically say like a large scale storm coming in where it's hitting the city centers and also the rural areas?
Yeah, well, one of the things you have to think about is that cities are typically much better resourced than rural areas, right? So you can't make assumptions about what you're going to have available in the more rural parts of a state or an area based on if you've only kind of dealt with urban situations or urban emergency management. Coming from New York and then moving to Philly, I've got a certain set of, I think, kind of principles or foundational knowledge that was very like urban centric. And coming to FEMA really opened my eyes to the challenges that rural emergency managers face, like really doing less with more, having to partner a lot more, having to think outside the box, and then just being really resource strapped. And most emergency managers don't have the luxury of working in a 50, 60, 200 person office. It's a one person shop, and sometimes it's somebody's, part-time job. And so really thinking about how do you meet people where they are in terms of what they can bring to the table and what their resources are, and then thinking about what's the support that the FEMA Region 3 team can provide to that full diverse set of emergency managers out there.
So we've really been talking a lot about the idea of professionalizing emergency management. And what I mean by this is that you just stated about the part-time job or the collateral duty job of emergency management. What can we do as an industry, as emergency managers, to really get stakeholders, city managers, mayors to understand that emergency management isn't just something that you give to, hey Joe, you're now the emergency manager for the next year, go learn it. Well, what can we do to make it better?
Well, I think, there are so many local governments across the country, and then you think about the state governments and then FEMA. I think the first thing is demonstrating value, right? So emergency managers, emergency management operation in a jurisdiction has to demonstrate value. And in this economic climate, and I think the way government functions now, I think that value can't just be demonstrating your niche emergency management value. I mean, there are lots of things that emergency managers do and do well, right? Base skills, foundational things to our profession that other agencies, it's not their core competency, and we can add value to other efforts, right? So if you think about the things that emergency managers do well, the first thing that comes to mind in my mind is we coordinate. We are excellent coordinators. And there's lots of hard government problems that need good coordinators that know how to put together a team of people, develop a plan, and then action that plan. And so thinking about how you can help other agencies with their hard problems builds buy-in, right, and builds support. So I think it's one thing to kind of try to press people like, hey, this is really important and you have to pay attention to it. And that's important, right, because from a political standpoint, from an operational standpoint, it's important that emergency management be able to function and do its job for emergencies. But if you think about kind of the informal persuasion and buy-in and how that can be just as valuable, I think there's lots of things that we can do as a profession to do that.
Excuse me. How do we, as emergency managers, again, and this is trying to formulate this into the sense that as EMs, we know that what we do locally, right? And we know that we can rely on our state and we can rely on FEMA to come help us with either finances and sometimes material goods. But the general populace, the average citizen here in the United States, when they think about emergency management, they automatically go to FEMA, and that FEMA is going to come in on their white horses and save the day. How do we do a better job of saying, hey, look, at FEMA is just a support function, and they're not the response function? What are we doing wrong? I suppose I should ask.
Well, I think, when people see big natural disasters, right, they see FEMA. And so I think, their natural inclination is to think that every disaster involves FEMA, when we as a profession, and certainly most disasters don't involve FEMA. FEMA arrives when the incident exceeds state and local capability, and we provide support. And I think we as an agency are doing a better job of talking about our role. We're one part of a team, right? Emergency management is a team sport. It's got lots of players. We are one player on the team, right? Now we bring a certain set of skills to the team, like any player. If you think about a baseball team, like you're bringing certain skills to the table, but we are not the end all and be all, and we are certainly not the initial response force, right? So I think getting people to think about, who are the people that you call for everyday emergencies? Those are the same people that you're going to see in larger emergencies. And just like in larger emergencies that affect your community, you may get a police unit, you may get a fire unit, sometimes you get the parks department. As the incident expands, the number of people that help expand as well. And I think we can all at every level be reinforcing that message, both in our planning, right? How we engage the public in planning for emergencies, helping the public think about how to prepare for an emergency, and then when we're responding, I think that has to be a very consistent message across all of those avenues. Or again, people will just automatically think of FEMA, and they shouldn't, because again, we're just one part of the larger system.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to that is that when we take a look at some of the training that we do here at the local aspect of it, we should actually make it much more visible, right? When we do our exercises and drills, even in the EOC stuff, we never make it visible. People don't know what we're doing inside that box, right? And I think that's one of the things that we should do as well.
Yeah, and I think you raised a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up because I always look for an opportunity to talk about this. I think a lot of people in the emergency management profession, again, I'm not identifying specific folks, but I think there's a general feeling in the profession, at least that existed previously, is that the public is something that we have to manage, right? And I completely disagree with that approach. I think in order for your emergency plan to actually work, the public has to be a partner in executing that plan, right? So the more that we can talk to the public about what's going to happen during an emergency and what we need them to do to help us respond and help people, the better off we're all going to be as a community. So talking to them about the plans, talking to them about what we're going to be doing as government, what we need the public to do, and then showing them, right? Showing them training and exercise activities, getting them involved as participants in training and exercise activities. The more that we treat the public like a partner, the more they're going to partner with us during an emergency response.
Absolutely. I teach a class at UCI called the Social Impacts of Disaster, and that's part of it is realistically that the disaster impacts every part of our society, the social side of it. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing over Region 3.
Sounds good.
Seconds count during an emergency. That's why at Titan HST, we're always inventing new technology to help people stay safe and help people who can provide help get connected with people who need help. At Titan HST, we've deployed mesh networking, allowing emergency communication even when networks are down, augmented reality, and real-time translation. We believe in the power of people to help each other stay safe and thrive.
Are you looking for that bag to help you keep organized as you travel around, something you could carry with you every day? Well, VanQuest was founded with a simple mission: build the toughest bags and packs for you to carry every day and to help you stay organized and prepared. VanQuest has been making the ultra-durable bags and packs since 2011, and their bags and packs are trusted by the clients such as the FBI, the U.S. Secret Service, and U.S. SOCOM. Yes, that is the U.S. Special Operations Command. Their bags and packs offer the best organization for the user-friendly experience, such as the high visibility interior for the users. And I'm telling you something, I love that orange inside the bag because I can find the things I need quickly. I love my VanQuest bag. Don't forget, they offer free shipping, 100-day return guarantee, and a lifetime warranty. And if you put in EM Weekly, all caps, all one word, you get 10% off your total purchase. VanQuest.com. The Outer Limits Supply Company was founded on the idea of providing high-quality first aid kits. Their goal is to supply the life-saving equipment you'll need to mitigate the majority of medical or traumatic injuries often seen during austere conditions. Whether it is when you are on the outdoor adventure or your team has responded to a major crisis, the Outer Limits Supply Company provides practical, user-friendly first aid and trauma kits that anyone can use. If you enter EM Weekly at checkout, you'll receive 20% off your purchase. So go to www.outerlimitsupply.com today. Welcome back from that quick break. And thank you so much for listening to our sponsors, because without them, we could not bring the content that we're bringing you here today. So we'll jump down for break. I just wanted to ask a couple questions, what we alluded to earlier. How do you see us getting more women involved in emergency management?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, we have to market the profession, I think, to different audiences, and think about, let's take college, for example. I think there's a lot of emphasis on having people with emergency management degrees, and I think that's an important part of building the profession for the long term. I just think we can't do that to the exclusion of other degree interests, right? Because when I started in emergency management, we, had a very diverse set of experiences, whether it was you had a bachelor's in economics, or you were from the military, or you were a firefighter, or you didn't have a college degree. I think there's a lot of non-traditional routes to being an emergency manager. And I don't think that we want to discount those at the expense of just focusing on people that go through like a bachelor's and a master's in emergency management. That's important, but again, that's just one part of the puzzle. So if we do that and we think about how do we attract not just women, but other underrepresented communities to emergency management, I think, again, meeting people where they are. So thinking about looking at the affinity groups that those folks affiliate with, whether it's, lots of campuses have African American student coalitions. Lots of campuses have, Latino and Hispanic coalitions. I think going and talking to them about emergency management and what emergency management does, getting them interested is important. And I think out of the college environment, I think, again, how you market and who you market to is really important. And also thinking about having things in the profession that will attract people whose lives are more diverse than just coming to work 9 to 5, right? So I think for women in particular, having family-friendly policies is really important, because trying to juggle what is a 24/7 job with small children and family responsibilities is a real, I think, inhibitor to folks. When I've talked to women about even advancing inside of FEMA, that is a big concern for them, right? And so thinking about your family-friendly policies, which I will note, do not just help women, but help men as well. And I think that's an important thing that's left off in the conversation. Is a lot of this is like, oh, well, we have to make it family friendly for women. Well, we should make it family friendly for fathers too. Fathers want to spend time with their kids. So I think the family friendly part is really important.
Absolutely, yeah. I am blessed to have a great wife, and I mean, she's a social worker as well, so it's not like she's sitting at home. But she has the flexibility to be able to be with the kids when I have to leave. But sometimes, that gets her a little niffed at me at times, she, when I'm gone for 2-3 weeks.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, like, my biggest supporter is my husband, right? Like, I couldn't do what I do without him. And he's a teacher. He has a much more stable schedule than I do. But, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to, frankly, have this job. I mean, it takes a team, especially if you're raising kids, to work out how you're going to manage career and personal. And, that partnership is just really important.
Getting people involved in emergency management, and we're doing these things called EM shorts, where we have emergency managers from around the country kind of weighing in on things. And last week we had one where Tiffany, who was one of my students at one point, she was talking about getting youth involved in emergency management. And I think it's interesting that we don't have people who, well, I shouldn't say don't. There's not a lot of people out there who, when they're in high school or whatever, like, I want to be an emergency manager when I grow up type thing. I know that Kelly McKinney's, he's on the board of directors for a school in New York City, which is emergency management and public safety focused, a high school, charter school, things like that. What can we do to get people interested in becoming emergency managers, not just kind of like how you and I just talked about falling into it. I fell into it. It wasn't something I planned on doing when I grew up. How do we get people that really from the day one, when they go to college, are interested in going that career track to emergency management?
Yeah, I think, again, exposure at the younger ages is really important. So thinking about Explorer programs, partnering with Explorer programs, like here in Philly, the fire and police departments have Explorer programs. Thinking about how can you partner with them at an early age to, expose kids to emergency management. Maybe think about starting an Explorer program with your emergency management office. The thing is CERT, right? CERT's another gateway. Right. Yeah. So CERT, you're on a CERT as a middle schooler or a high schooler, you're helping and you're getting exposed to emergency management. You're seeing, hey, this is something I could actually make money on. Right. And then I think one of the things that FEMA's done that's been really profound in bringing young people in is Fema Core. Right. So here's a group of folks younger, either just out of high school or just out of college, coming together, really didn't think about emergency management beforehand, but now they're getting a different exposure to the profession. I can't tell you how many we have hired in Region 3, and I know we're not the only FEMA region that has done this, has hired people from Fema Core. They've been phenomenal employees, and a lot of them never really thought about working in emergency management before they came to, before they discovered Fema Core. So I don't think there's a one-size-fit-all approach. I think there's, what are all the different tools that we have available? How can we outreach to youth? How can we get them interested in an early age where they then kind of see that through high school and then into college? And then how do we convert them when they graduate college into an emergency management job, right? What's the career pipeline for them? So I think all those things are really important.
A lot of my people will reach out to me. LinkedIn is like one of the places where they reach out and they say, how do I break into emergency management? It's like really hard to get into, right? It's like winning the lottery, I suppose. And I tell them, I said, you need to have, your experience based along with your education. And when they ask about getting experience, I'm like, yeah, join like the American Red Cross or join Team Rubicon, where you're going to be able to go across the country, maybe even internationally in some cases, and do on the ground emergency management type stuff. What do you think of using those like a Team Rubicon to pull? I know Jeff is on here looking in here. How do we pull into like a Team Rubicon? How do we do a career track with those people that are interested in doing it and moving on into EM?
Yeah, I think, again, any organization that has a touch point to disasters they have an opportunity to engage youth, right? Because, you know, kids are interested in different things. Like I think about my son, you know, he's 8, he's interested in a lot of things. Right now, he's really into space, right? Maybe that's something that's going to take off and he's going to be an astronaut. Or maybe, you know, in 2 weeks, he might be interested in something else. So I think it's thinking about like, how do you get kids interested at the different stages of their life and then give them on ramps, right? Because they may be interested for a little bit, but then they might pick up something else. So, but like later on, they might say, hey, you know, I really enjoyed that. I want to on ramp back on, you know, on ramp back into that. So I think you have to think about it as you know, and everybody that has kids knows, like, you know, you can't control them, but what you can do is present them with lots of different opportunities. And the more that you can expose them to different things, the more they might, you know, on ramp to something that could then become something else. So I think it's at every stage of life, whether it's, you know, you're in the 3rd grade or you're in 6th grade or you're in high school, we've got to think about those on ramping opportunities. And so thinking about how the organizations in your community can help kids on ramp to a career in emergency management. And I will give Jeff a shout out since you did mention Team Rubicon. I saw his comments in there and just wanted to give him a shout out.
So, okay, we have a question here. It says, when will we see EM on the Weather Channel during non-emergencies? Thanks, Eileen.
Yeah, could you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I think this goes back to making the public a partner in your plans, you know, and I will give another homage to Jeff. We've always talked about, you know, like your neighbor is a first responder, right? When you have a disaster, whether it's your house floods or a tornado comes through or your house is on fire, the first people you usually see, or at least the first people who call 911 are your neighbors, right? So they are a part of the emergency response system, whether we recognize it or not, right? So I would say you need to recognize the public is a key part of helping people after disasters. One of the most important ways that you can get people to be helpful is to talk to them about what your plan is and what you need them to do. And we have to engage the public before an event. And so like one of the things, I'll take an example. One of the things I did when I was in Philly, we did the city's evacuation plan, right? And so we thought about like, how are we going to roll that out? And, you know, one of the things I did a couple times in Philly is did background briefings for the press, right? So bring all the press into the EOC, you actually show them the plan, you show them the maps. We worked with the main newspaper in Philadelphia. We developed some pre-canned artwork that they'd have ready to go. If we had to do an evacuation, they could just run it on their press. You know, all that pre-work helps for then during an event. Now the press is informed, right? You can start at the same place, you know, same level of awareness. You've got some things pre-canned with them that they can run, and they're still going to do their job and hold government accountable, which is a key part of what they do. But that doesn't mean we can't work with them as a partner to help educate people, especially in times of crisis. And then fast forward to FEMA, one of the things that we've been thinking more about, at least in Region 3, is how can we do similar background briefings for the press to bring them up to speed in our program. So we've done that with our public assistance program, given background briefings on how the program works, so that when the press does ask questions, their questions are more informed and it can be better, you know, better stories to tell the public, and also I think just better information for them so they, you know, understand how the program works and they're more accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things too, is we can't be afraid to engage the public in that response, because I say this all the time. My first responder friends get mad at me sometimes, but as I always say, hey, actually the fire and police are second responders, because the first responders are definitely your neighbors. The first disaster that I could remember in my entire life was the blizzard of 1977 in Buffalo, New York. And we had so much snow, you know, we were actually socked in, and they actually had people on snowmobiles driving through the city to get people to the hospitals, and also to bring food and stuff to people who didn't have it. And that wasn't, you know, Buffalo Fire Department or the the police doing that. That was the local people who had snowmobiles in their garages that were able to get them out and doing that stuff. So yeah, I mean, community is always been that first step in disaster response. And as emergency managers, we really need to embrace the community portion of it. Well, we're getting close here to the end. We got a couple minutes left. I'd like to give it some time for you to kind of pitch what you're doing and anything that you'd like to talk about specifically with FEMA Region 3.
Yeah, so, you know, we just closed out National Preparedness Month, so hopefully everybody took some of the month to get a little bit more ready. We're going into Fire Safety Month, so I think thinking about fire safety, especially where you are on the West Coast, really important, given all the fires happening across, you know, from Oregon all the way to California. is critical. And then I think, we've got the great shakeout coming up. So I think, and we just had the earthquake swarm in California last night. So I think there's a lot of preparedness that we can be doing and thinking about the shakeout coming up and participating. Those are a couple things I'll mention. Nationally, in terms of Region 3, we are still in the height of hurricane season, so we're obviously very tuned into that. And then thinking about how we're going to be able to safely respond and help people in the COVID environment is another thing we're really focused on.
Well, MaryAnn, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're super busy and you got to get running. I do appreciate it. Hey, and the door's always open whenever you want to come back.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This was great.
Awesome. Hey, everybody else. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Ian Weekly Show. I really appreciate you all spending time with me this morning. I want to say a quick shout out to my friends that are up in Sonoma County and in California here with that rager that's going on. Please, everybody, stay safe up there. And if you guys need anything, please feel free to reach out. Reach out early. Let us know. And I know that everybody here is in support of what's going on and for the rest of the fires that are happening across the country as well. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. And for the LinkedIn crowd, this is our first LinkedIn live with Ian Weekly. It's exciting to see everybody out there talking. And everybody, please stay safe out there. And don't do anything crazy. We have some bad things coming our way as far as storms and the fires and whatnot, and just don't overwork yourself and reach out early to ask for help. So stay safe and stay hydrated. Until next week, we will see you here.